Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and I hope that you enjoyed your lunch and that you're now ready to get back to work. Before we had our lunch, we were pleased to have the Saskatchewan new Premier, Scott Moe, address us. And now I'm happy to say that for the very first time at a SUMA convention, we're now going to have the Leader of the Opposition as well. And this arose out of last year at the convention when people said, well, if we have the Premier, why don't we have the Leader of the Opposition? And so in SUMA style, we're responding to your wish and command. And so I'm happy to say today that I'm now pleased to introduce to you the interim leader of the official opposition, Nicole Sarauer. Nicole was, yes, by all means. Nicole was elected less than 2 years ago, so she's in the first term of her legislative career, and she's already the interim leader of the opposition, so I'll leave it to your imagination as to where it goes from there. But she's certainly so far had quick promotion. She represents the constituency of Regina Douglas Park. On behalf of the SUMA, our board of directors, all of our members that you see here, and our administrators, and all of the people we represent, I want to thank you for coming to address us today. She was telling me that when she agreed to take on the role of interim leader of the opposition, one of the first things that struck her was, oh my God, I'm now going to have to address the SUMA convention. So here the day has arrived. I told her not to feel intimidated. There's only about 1,000 people here. But I also want Nicole to know that we represent 78% of the province's population living in Saskatchewan hometowns. And so we are pleased to have you here today. And please, everyone, have a warm welcome for Nicole Sarauer, please.
No, I wasn't feeling too intimidated until I was getting heckled by Don Cody before I even got to the podium. So you know how that is going, what that's going to mean for your afternoon. Thank you so much, Gordon, for the very kind introduction. And I want to thank the board for the invitation to speak with all of you this afternoon. I'd also like to add my voice to those welcoming you to the great city of Regina. Even though I know you've already been here for what I'm sure seems a little bit longer than the 24 hours it's actually been sitting in this room. It was just last night. I know that you held your reception, and I apologize that I wasn't there. I was at home watching a football game, and I'll admit that it's one of the very few times where I'm not cheering for the team that's wearing green, which means that I cheered for the Patriots last night. Fair enough, mixed responses, but I was doing it out of solidarity for my fiance, who is a die-hard Patriots fan, and I'd ask that you please not hold against me the fact that I am willfully and consciously choosing to marry somebody who is a die-hard Patriots fan. This morning, I know you've already had one speaker after another, and now you might be asking yourself, why is the interim leader of the Saskatchewan NDP here? Well, I'm standing here today because in these very tough and challenging times, we all need to stand together. We need to build and stand together so we can stand up for the people we're all elected to represent. And on that note, I'd just like to acknowledge my caucus colleagues who've joined us here today and who have been and will be visiting with many of you throughout the convention. I'd like to first start with Nicole Rancourt. Besides being a great MLA in Prince Albert, one of the hats Nicole wears for our team is the critic and spokesperson for municipal relations. Among other groups, Nicole works regularly with your board, and I know with many of you. When you're concerned about what the government is doing, or perhaps what they're not doing, she is your voice in the legislature. And if you haven't had the chance to meet with her yet, let me assure you, hers is a powerful and relentless voice. But of course, the rest of our caucus also works on the issues that affect Saskatchewan's hometowns. Here today we have David Forbes, Vicky Mowat, Doyle Vermette, Warren McCall, Carla Beck, and of course the two who are running to be the leader of our party and hopefully in a couple of years will earn the speaking spot before lunch, Trent Weatherspoon and Ryan Miley. Like I was saying, we're all here because, as it says on your convention documents, the power is in our hometowns. Before going further, I'd also like to acknowledge, as others already have, that we are meeting here on Treaty 4 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. I mention that in part to remind all of us of our shared histories and the relationships that we all have to keep working on to improve. Because it doesn't take much of a look in the news today to see that we have so much work to do to move beyond prejudice and toward understanding and reconciliation. And with that, I do want to take a moment to commend all of you, and the SUMA board in particular, for taking leadership in committing to take action to promote reconciliation. So thank you for your work on that. Making note of the treaties and the traditions of this place is also an opportunity to remind us all that, like we are doing here this week, people have gathered on this land that is now called Saskatchewan for hundreds of years to discuss the needs, the goals, and the priorities of their communities, and to meet, to trade, to share, and help one another. That's obviously why we're here now, because we know we all do better when we all do better. Of course, I could stand here today and talk about all the things I think were a little difficult in the Premier's speech, or I could talk about the decisions in the last budget, how they promised to never raise taxes but then hiked the PST by about $1 billion, how they doubled the debt in just 5 years, how while other provinces, including Alberta, are getting people back to work, they've left the Saskatchewan unemployment rate climb above the national average for the first time in over 40 years. I could talk about how their decisions have hurt Saskatchewan families, our kids, and our most vulnerable, how despite a decade of record resource revenue, they didn't save a cent and they shared way too little. I could talk about they didn't invest in Saskatchewan workers, Saskatchewan families, or Saskatchewan's future in either education or infrastructure. Or I could also talk about how, by scrapping STC, they left many in many of your communities stranded. The elderly and the more vulnerable who are now looking to you to provide services locally they used to get elsewhere. I could talk about how, instead of cutting grants in lieu, they could have cut back on the $2 billion they handed to a foreign conglomerate from France for the Regina bypass, a single stretch of road that took up 70% of the province's entire highways budget this year. How, instead of forcing 3 power rate hikes in the last 2 years, they could have better managed the $1.5 billion they spent on carbon capture so far. And of course, how instead of throwing tens of millions away with their GTH scandal, they could have invested in our hometowns. Yes, I could do a whole speech on that, but that's not why we're here. We're here because I want to assure all of you that in us, in the official opposition, and in the Saskatchewan NDP, you have a partner in your fight to stand up for hometowns across this province. Last year, when the provincial government threatened tens of millions of dollars in funding that you use to serve your people by cutting grants in lieu, and when they downloaded millions onto your budgets with cuts to funding for municipal parks, community rinks, and urban connector programs, and when they tried to cut our libraries. We were proud to work with you, with SUMA, with your partners, and concerned citizens across the province to win some very small but very important victories. But obviously, we do still have a long way to go. And we are proud to be your partners as we keep fighting for Saskatchewan people. We're partners in telling the Sask Party that just because they squandered and refused to save, that doesn't make it okay for them to punish those who were more responsible and built reserves. And because, after facing all that the government dumped on you, many of you had no choice but to freeze programs and services or even make cuts and raise your mill rates. We are partners in reminding Saskatchewan people that those cuts and tax hikes are Sask Party cuts and tax hikes. Now I know they're trying to change the channel and promise they've changed. There's someone new now sitting at the Premier's seat, but just about everyone else around that cabinet table is exactly the same. They swapped out our former Premier, brought in Mr. Kading, and the cabinet is now one seat larger. According to the former Premier's own math, that means it will cost Saskatchewan people about $500,000 more. And there are still only 4 women and 14 men at that decision-making table. So I ask for your forgiveness if I don't have a whole lot of hope that we'll see a whole lot of change. Now that I'm here, I do want to take the opportunity to clear up a few things. First, and we did hear the Premier speak about this, on Kinder Morgan. There is no doubt that we need to do more in Saskatchewan to increase our share of renewable energy technologies. We need to do more, better regulations, and more monitoring to protect the water we drink, the ground we live on. We need to do so much more. Also to ensure a collaborative approach to approvals that guarantees a voice for Indigenous communities and affected municipalities. All that said, the energy sector remains a cornerstone of our economy, and pipelines remain the safest way to get our resources to market. While Kinder Morgan doesn't transport any Saskatchewan oil, it does affect how our customers see how the entire Canadian sector operates. And for that reason, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Premier, actually, in supporting the Alberta government. Second, and I can't believe I still have to correct this error, and they're still trying to deny the facts. I will be clear. We, the Saskatchewan NDP, are unequivocally opposed to letting Ottawa impose their carbon tax on Saskatchewan. That's another thing we actually agree with the Premier on. However, while the Sask party have been walking out of meetings or talking tough, every other province has acted and protected themselves from that carbon tax. But because of, not despite, because of their refusal to listen, to change their tune and to develop and defend a made-in-Saskatchewan solution, they are leaving Saskatchewan vulnerable to possibly being the only province that will get hit by the federal tax. That doesn't make any sense to us. It's not good for Saskatchewan people, it's not good for our hometowns, and it's not good for our economy. I look forward to working with all of you to encourage them to move from tough talk to real action and start genuinely and effectively defending and representing Saskatchewan people. And that's why we want to keep building and working together, because beyond the budget, this year will bring many challenges for us to work on together. We will be your partner in working to firm up and protect grants in lieu and other transfers from the province to be fair and predictable, not a surprise announcement on budget day. Speaking of fairness, we will be your partner in working to ensure that Saskatchewan people have a tax assessment regime and appeal process they can have faith in. And we will be your partner in your fight to get a fair share of funding to cover the costs that have been downloaded onto your backs. Surely in Saskatchewan, it's reasonable to expect that the provincial government can find a way to work with municipalities to protect and maintain our hometown rinks. This year, we will also have new challenges to face together, and we will be your partner in fighting to make sure municipalities have a fair say, that your voices are heard and respected through proper consultation, real consultation. When it comes to the legalization of cannabis, we will be your partner in getting you the consultation, information, and funding you need. Yes, Ottawa may have changed the law, but then the provincial government has dragged their feet and continues to drag their feet. As you all know, it's you who will have to foot the bill and the ones that will have to manage the consequences. Also, when it comes to ride-share legislation, the facts aren't much different. We need to make sure you have the tools, the information, and the support you need. We will work with you, We will be your partners on all of these files, right on down to holding Premier Moe to his word on giving you a voice when it comes to any proposed solid waste management strategy changes. Friends, I also want to thank you for all the work that you do. You work at the heart of our democracy, and our hometowns are, in fact, our hearts. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but we can get through it if we keep working and building together. And I believe the people of our great province deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you for coming, and thank you for addressing us this afternoon. That worry that you had when you took on this role of you're having to address SUMA, it showed certainly from your performance that you weren't all that worried after all. So good luck, and thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and offering your thoughts. We also appreciate you offering your partnership. And I think we, as SUMA overall, want to work with all sides of the House to make sure that we have a good partnership to make this province the very best it can be. And on behalf of SUMA and our board and all of our members here, I want to present to you a token of our appreciation by making a donation to the Mike Badham Fund. Mike Badham was a member of City Council on the board of SUMA, very much involved with education. And this donation will go in support of education students studying at the University of Regina. So once again, thank you very much. Two more quick announcements. I just want to remind everyone that the webinar on February the 14th will involve the two members, the two candidates that are running for the leadership of the NDP. So make sure you make a note of that. It's been in our Urban Voice, the actual times and how to connect. And so I just remind you of that. I also want to tell you now that you have a 5-minute break in order to move into the sector meetings. The town sector will be right here in this room. The city sector will meet in room number 3. Resort villages, northern municipalities and villages will meet in rooms 1 and 2. So enjoy your sector meetings. Thank you very much for being here now.